By the standards of history, few figures emerge from darker beginnings than Theodora of Byzantium. Even ancient Rome, with its notorious arenas and bloody spectacles, drew the line at certain forms of entertainment. Yet in Constantinople's Hippodrome, the largest arena of the Byzantine world, practices unfolded that shocked even seasoned observers. Within this brutal world, children were drawn into exploitative performances that modern audiences would find unimaginable. It was here that Theodora's story began, an origin marked by trauma, manipulation, and survival that would one day transform her into the most powerful woman in the Eastern Roman Empire. Her journey starts with her father, Acacius, the bearkeeper of Constantinople's Green faction. He trained great beasts for staged combats before tens of thousands of spectators. His sudden death should have guaranteed protection for his widow and children. That was the custom. But corruption intervened. A rival official accepted a bribe and handed the bearkeeper's role to another family. With that one act, Theodora's mother was left destitute, her daughters vulnerable to the unforgiving world of the Hippodrome. In desperation, she turned to the only system available, an entertainment industry notorious for exploitation. Ancient sources record that performers, especially women and children, were treated with little dignity, often categorized legally alongside the lowest professions of society. Theodora and her sisters were paraded before the factions as supplicants, a public plea for mercy and survival. The Greens, once their patrons, turned their backs. But the Blues, rivals to the Greens, offered her stepfather work. That gesture sealed Theodora's lifelong allegiance and sowed the seeds of vengeance that would define her. By the age of 10, Theodora was performing in spectacles that blurred the line between theater and cruelty. What might have broken most children instead became her harsh education. Night after night, she learned to observe the behavior of the powerful, senators, merchants, and officials, men who revealed their weaknesses in moments of indulgence. Where others endured humiliation, Theodora took notes. The Hippodrome became her school, and its curriculum was the study of power, psychology, and manipulation. For 6 years, she survived within this brutal machine. By her mid-teens, she was not only one of the most famous performers, but also one of the most perceptive observers of human nature in the empire. Wealthy patrons thought they were buying her submission. In reality, they were teaching her how influence worked, how desire could blind even the most powerful, and how humiliation could erode authority. Her turning point came when a provincial governor named Hesibulus took her into his household as a concubine. For 4 years, Theodora lived in luxury in North Africa. But this was no mere escape. It was an advanced course in political and personal control. She learned how the most powerful officials, men commanding armies and provinces, could be undone by their own appetites. Yet when she overstepped, using her insight to influence his political decisions, Hesibulus cast her out. Betrayed and abandoned, she crossed the Mediterranean alone. Each stop, whether on ships, in taverns, or among merchants, offered new lessons. She turned survival into strategy, memorizing the weaknesses of every man who underestimated her. By the time she reached Alexandria, she had converted to monophysite Christianity, not purely from faith, but as a way to anchor herself to a growing religious movement independent of the empire's mainstream. It was in Antioch that she met Macedonia, a fellow performer and informant. Macedonia revealed something startling. Justinian, the ambitious nephew of Emperor Justin, had heard of her. He wanted to know more about the woman who had endured abandonment, survived exploitation, and turned her suffering into mastery over human psychology. As her ship finally returned to Constantinople, Theodora saw once again the golden domes of the city that had once cast her aside. But this time, she was not the desperate child begging for survival. She was a woman forged in fire, sharpened by cruelty, and armed with insights no senator, no merchant, and no emperor could ignore. The same brutal system that should have destroyed her had instead created a weapon, and Theodora was about to wield it, not for entertainment, but for power. What followed would not only shape her destiny, but alter the course of the Byzantine Empire forever. Constantinople, 522 CE. A young woman named Theodora was about to step onto the stage of history. She carried with her years of painful experience, survival, and the ability to read and influence those around her with remarkable precision. When Prince Justinian, heir to the Byzantine throne, first laid eyes on her at a court gathering, he thought he was meeting just another former entertainer. What he could not see was the sharp mind and the hard-earned resilience she had developed through years of struggle. Theodora was no ordinary court guest. She had learned how power worked in the empire, how men thought, and how influence could be won not only through appearance, but through intelligence, emotional connection, and sheer determination. Justinian, known for his brilliance and ambition, found himself captivated. What began as fascination soon deepened into an unshakable bond. The relationship shocked Constantinople. Senators and courtiers could hardly believe that the heir to the throne would consider marrying a woman with such a controversial past. Laws forbade unions between actresses and men of high office. Even Empress Euphemia, Justinian's adoptive mother and a former slave herself, strongly opposed the match. She saw in Theodora someone who could use her talents in ways that might alter the empire itself. The confrontation between the two women became legendary, a battle of wills over the very future of Rome. But fate intervened. In 523 CE, Euphemia suddenly passed away. With the most powerful obstacle removed, Emperor Justin quickly moved to change the laws, allowing his nephew to marry Theodora. In 525 CE, in the grand setting of Hagia Sophia, Justinian and Theodora wed. The child who had once lived on the margins of society now walked the marble aisles in imperial purple silk, becoming the Empress of Byzantium. Yet her rise was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning. Theodora's influence over Justinian was immense. She was not a silent consort. She was his partner in governance, shaping decisions, offering counsel, and projecting her will onto the empire itself. This partnership, however, made her a target. Many saw her as unworthy of power, and when rebellion erupted, it was Theodora who faced the greatest test of all. In January 532 CE, the Nika revolt tore through Constantinople. Blues and Greens, the rival chariot factions, united in rage against the government. Tens of thousands filled the streets, burning buildings and threatening to overthrow the emperor. Senators whispered about abandoning the city, and Justinian himself considered fleeing. It was then that Theodora rose and delivered the words that would define her legacy. She told the council that purple was the noblest shroud, that death with honor was better than life without a throne. Her defiance transformed the moment. Instead of running, Justinian and his generals struck back. In a carefully planned counterattack, imperial troops trapped the rebels inside the Hippodrome. What followed was one of the bloodiest suppressions in Roman history. Tens of thousands were killed. Constantinople's streets, which had once echoed with chants for rebellion, fell silent under imperial control. Theodora had faced the fire and survived. From a childhood of humiliation, she rose to command an empire alongside her husband. Loved by some, despised by others, she proved herself a ruler of unshakable will. And in the chaos of the Nika revolt, she showed the world that her past had forged her into one of the most formidable women of the Byzantine age. Blood seeped into the sand of the Hippodrome, the very place that had once echoed with the cries of children forced into degrading performances. The irony was chilling. This arena, which had trained her to endure the cruelty of violent crowds, now became the stage for her most terrifying act. By the end of that day, silence replaced the screams. More than 30,000 rebels lay dead, their uprising crushed without mercy. The Hippodrome, once a site of brutal entertainment, had been transformed into a graveyard by the very woman it had helped to shape. Justinian's reforms of 535 CE made governors swear loyalty not only to the emperor, but also to his empress. Theodora, once a victim of exploitation, had now risen to the highest throne, her survival transformed into absolute power. Those barbaric practices that nearly broke her had instead created someone who understood that survival required the destruction of every threat. With tens of thousands of corpses proving her strength, she began constructing something more dangerous than armies, an invisible empire of manipulation. From within her private chambers, Theodora built what some historians describe as a parallel government, though in truth it resembled an early intelligence network. While Justinian presided over his court, she gathered secrets in the shadows. Eunuchs and trusted women served as her agents, slipping through palace corridors, listening, watching, collecting the most dangerous information imaginable. Who betrayed whom? Which senators carried hidden shames? Which private weaknesses could be turned into political weapons? She demanded that everyone at court prostrate themselves and kiss both her feet and Justinian's, a ritual of humiliation turned into domination. What she had once endured as a powerless child, she now reversed with merciless precision. Her mastery of political assassination soon followed. In 537 CE, Pope Silverius refused to support her religious ally. Rather than argue theology, Theodora used her gift for manipulation, weaving treason charges that preyed upon the paranoia of powerful men. The Pope, accused of betraying the empire, was exiled and died far from Rome, his downfall orchestrated by the Empress's hand. But Theodora's ambition went further. In 535 CE, Queen Amalasuntha of the Ostrogoths became her next target. The queen embodied everything Theodora feared: noble birth, inherited power, and most dangerously, a political closeness to Justinian that could turn into something more. The Empress recognized the signs. She herself had perfected them. When persuasion failed, she turned to destruction. Amalasuntha was murdered while bathing, her vulnerability exploited in a calculated strike of jealousy and political survival. Her greatest masterpiece, however, was the fall of John the Cappadocian, the Praetorian prefect. Unlike others, John could not be manipulated. He understood the game. So Theodora turned to psychological warfare. For 6 months, John received symbolic gifts meant to unsettle him: wilted flowers, daggers, images of death. His nights grew sleepless, his nerves frayed. She recreated in his mind the same torment she had once endured. Finally, she set the trap. With her ally Antonina, she used John's own daughter to entangle him in a fabricated conspiracy. His ruin was immediate, his power gone, his life reduced to desperation. Through each of these acts, Theodora transformed herself from victim to predator. She wasn't merely eliminating rivals, she was rewriting the empire itself, turning manipulation into the foundation of governance. Even the law bore her mark. Her legislation outlawed forced prostitution, shut down exploitative establishments, and punished sexual violence with unprecedented severity. Yet, at the same time, she imposed control over women's lives through religious institutions, ensuring they lived under structures she herself designed. Her reforms revealed a mind shaped by suffering, but sharpened into one of history's most formidable political weapons. When she died in 548 CE at the age of 48, Justinian was shattered. He never remarried and struggled to rule without her. The empire's most creative legislation, the very heartbeat of its governance, had come from her hand. Her image endures in the mosaics of San Vitale, cloaked in royal garments, larger than the figures around her, portrayed as equal to biblical kings. Today, tourists walk the Hippodrome unaware that beneath their feet lies the echo of both degradation and vengeance. Theodora's story is not just about survival. It is about how trauma can be transformed into the ultimate form of power. She proved that barbaric practices don't merely destroy victims, they can create rulers who wield destruction themselves. Her story forces one question: was the transformation from victim to empress worth the cost of 30,000 lives? In the end, the girl who learned survival through manipulation reshaped an empire with the very tools once used against her.